Hello, Kenku. I am currently on my southern... Hello, Kenku. I'm currently on my southern U.S. road trip, and I figured instead of doing one big SendingKenku this month, it might be nice to do a bunch of small ones and then just piece them together. Maybe give a sending at the very end. So yeah, that's what we're going to do as I go throughout a bunch of different states. Just small little things. So right now I am at Cahokia Mounds State Park, historic site, one of them, Cahokia Mounds, and I'm not supposed to be here. My only goal for today was to get to the Mark Twain National Forest to find a campsite to bed down and just enjoy the park, and instead I found myself at Cahokia. And before this, I found myself in a small little town that had a bunch of world's largest mailbox, world's largest teeter-totter, and bird cage, and all that sort of stuff. And so the first sending I want to do is about the side quests, the side treks. There is so much that is planned in life, but there's also so much that isn't. And it's that little thing. It's watching for the glitters just to the corner of your vision to get distracted. I get distracted a lot. I also don't like to plan too far ahead. Like I like to know what's going on. I like to have a very set idea of what's going on, and I don't like that to change. But there's not a whole lot of detail in the planning. And that's kind of how I run my games, is that I have the big idea, and then I just have a bunch of little distractions. And there are times where you need to get your list of priorities done. And then there's other times where the only priority is get to a location before nightfall. And it's okay to let yourself get distracted. It's okay to just let things happen. Not everything has to be planned. If you try to plan everything, you are going to indubitably plan to not do a lot of things, because a lot of things just won't fit into the schedule. So yeah, that's the first part, and we'll see where I pick you up next. All of these segments of the SendingKenku were supposed to be different. They were supposed to be different, and yet over the past 2 days, from Missouri to Arkansas to Tennessee to Alabama, now through Mississippi, Georgia, and starting our morning in Florida, the topic remains the same. Kind of. As opposed to having time for side treks, not planning, not over-scheduling. The first player I went to see, they were expecting me to just have like, hey, I want a complete list of everything we're doing. And I never gave it to them. We were going to do disc golf. And then that fell through because they ended up in Memphis with a flat tire, not their car, their friends. So I drove out to Memphis, and we had a bunch of random stuff happen out there. Went to Botanical Garden, accidentally stumbled onto Japan Fest. Next day, supposed to meet a player in the evening, late evening, for wings. Just going to a wing place. Instead, they got most of their day off. We ended up going and get sushi, went up a mountain, the official, unofficial end of the Appalachian Mountains, and then got to see the Talladega Super Speedway. Those were not planned at all. Those were both precisely, we planned to do one thing each. One thing. And we didn't even do that. We did 2 or 3 other things. So I don't know how much more this SendingKenku is going to stray from planning, but turns out there's times where planning don't do it. Like, have the husk of an idea. The husk. Know that you want to do something with someone and just let things happen. How does this relate to role-playing games? I don't know. I have a bunch of players that complain about they plan too much and then it doesn't go to plan, because that's D&D. No plan survives contact with the game master, and no game master plan survives contact with the players. So have intentions, have goals, but unless something is really needing to be prioritized, just kind of let it flow, I guess. I don't know. We'll find out what the next segment of this is, and then we'll see if it ties together or not. While the note on prioritization is decent, when applying it to role-playing games, it's more than just don't forget the main objective, because the interview with Greg was not the main objective in this trip. I was just going to go and enjoy myself. And it was only after giving more thought to it that became something I really wanted to do. And when you're in, especially in a more of a free-form campaign, it's a bit easier to stay on topic when you have a source book, if you have a campaign setting. But if you're doing a free-form game, it becomes much more apparent that if you don't focus on understanding what you want, you end up missing opportunities, and you miss things that would have been splendorous, but however close you skim to them, if you don't know you want it, you don't know you want it. And in some of my games, that's been something that's happened, where it's only after like getting to the tail end of the game, getting towards the conclusion, we realize, wait, we never did this thing. We never did this thing that, we had thought about a bit but hadn't pursued, or after a whole bunch of hijinks, it's like, I wanted something more. I don't know what I wanted, but I wanted more. So putting time into actually thinking about what more is, and putting deliberate thought into making things deeper than they innately are. Some things are meant to be shallow, that's fine, but sometimes you have to dig for depth. That sounds silly, but sometimes you have to dig for depth. So while the entire beginning of this trip was about following the tangents, following the distractions, and letting the journey be what the journey was going to be, I now have evidence of that is not the best way to always do it, because sometimes you really need a drive, you need a motivation. The reason why I haven't done any vacations or trips before this on my own has been I didn't have a motivation, and I thought I found a motivation with wanting to see all my players, which is great. But for that personal thing, putting deliberate thought into making it more exactly what I want, as opposed to just the superficial stuff. But the superficial stuff is great. So this sending started in Cahokia Mound State Park, so it seems fitting that we finish it in Lake Jackson Mounds State Park. So yeah, we had our meeting at Lofty Pursuits, we had our interview, that all happened, and afterwards, with some of the unrecorded conversation, we talked about things that ended up being life advice, business advice, talked about how a lot of the stuff that is in the interview was stuff that came out just by talking with people and interacting with people and getting out there and seeing what is available to happen and just doing things. And so that happened, and then with some points of other locations in Tallahassee, went and talked with a couple more people and had one really good conversation at the Great Games Cafe. And that was there was business conversation, and then just general business camaraderie, peership a little bit. And those were things that weren't really planned, but it followed what the plan was. And so as we come to the end of this sending, it is really about that mixture of the opportune, about taking advantage of what you happen upon, but also taking advantage of what you can plan for. The ability to look ahead and create something in the future is a wonderful ability, And it can lead to things far greater than the opportune, but the opportune can be so much more random and can be things that, because it's not in your control, it's also not within your mental limitations. However brilliant we are, if we only do things that we have thought of, if we only do things that have been planned, we ourselves become the limiter of that situation. So it's this mixture of the sporadic and the deliberate desire, and figuring out a way to marry those two. That's kind of what this trip is about. So yeah, this is my SendingKenku. Find a way to live both lives, the planned and the unplanned, the precedented and the unprecedented.